Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Good afternoon to you all. Really great to see in the chat where everybody's joining us from. My name's Christine Colvin, and I'm the Director for Communications and Partnerships with the Rivers Trust. And I'm here with my colleague, Michelle Walker, our Technical Director, to talk you through all the latest stuff on our sewage map. This is the third year that we've produced this map, and as we've been using the data, understanding it better, and seeing how you guys are using it, we've realized that we want it to evolve and grow and to be able to do more things, particularly in the fight to end sewage pollution. So we've developed some new features for the map this year, which means that because there's more to it, it's a little bit more complicated, and we want to make sure that you're all using it to its fullest potential. So we thought it'd be helpful if we could just talk you through it and explain it a bit more. Michelle and I are just going to do exactly that, show you what the map can do, and how to use it. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. So you should see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. If you've got questions that you'd like to put to us, please add those in there, and very happy for you all to kind of continue using the chat as well. But if you've got a specific question, we probably won't pick it up unless it's in the Q&A. Also, if anybody needs subtitles, there's the live transcript function at the bottom where it says CC, and that will automatically generate subtitles for you. We'll try and speak very clearly. And just to let you know that this is being recorded as well. So if something happens and you lose us or you have to rush off, we will be sharing the link to the webinar, hopefully later on this afternoon or early tomorrow. Okay, so I'm going to kick off and hopefully share my screen easily with you. Right, here we go. Now I just need to move a few things around so that I can manipulate stuff. Okay, so if you're not coming to the map through one of the links that we've sent through to you and you are on our website, first of all, important thing to show you how to find it. So this is our home page, and if you go to key issues and then scroll down the key issues, and you'll see underneath state of our rivers, raw sewage in our rivers. So if you click on that, and then you will get through to the page that hosts the map itself and more information about it as well. So you can just dive straight into the map on this home page, but we encourage you to come down here and click through this button, the Learn More button, because then that takes you into a story map where we've also tried to lay things out to make it really easy for you to access. So of course there's diving into the map there, but we also give you quite a bit more information about the data itself, where it comes from, how to understand the data. There's a selection of frequently asked questions here. Later on, we'll be coming back to what you can do and a bit of history as to how we've got this far. But if you want to dive in and have a look at the sewage map, then that's where you go to. You click on there, and you can zoom in and start having a look at the data itself and the map. And what immediately pops up here is the latest, the 2021 data, but the first time now we're also giving you access to some historical data as well. So for more on that data and what you can see on the map itself, I'm going to hand over to Michelle now. And Michelle, if you start sharing your screen, we'll be doing this double act.
Thanks, Christine. Okay, so hopefully you can see my version of the map now. Yeah, so as Christine says, we've got the sort of 2021 data appearing on the map by default. This is the event duration monitoring data, which is the data that the water companies are required to report to the Environment Agency about how many times those combined sewer overflows and storm overflows have spilt during the previous 12 months. The data are reported to the Environment Agency in something like February of the following year, and then the EA collate that for a few weeks and do some cleaning, and then it gets published at the end of March. So we've been pushing really hard through things like the DEFRA Storm Overflows Task Force for that data to be improved and made more accessible, and that's made a big difference this year to how quickly we could get it onto our map, because the quality of the data and things like the location information have really improved. So, you know, it's an awful situation how often this is happening, but I think getting transparency on it is really important. Okay, so when we first load the map, you can see a clustered map basically, which is showing a sort of overall view of what things are like in the country, but you really need to start drilling down into more detail to be able to see what's going on in your local area. And what I would say, although the map is accessible on mobile devices, you're going to get the best experience by looking at it on a large screen, on a laptop or a larger device, really. So you can zoom in on map and start to sort of zoom into your local area of interest, but you can also use the search tool up here in the top right. On a mobile device, you can use your current location, or you can put in a search term or a postcode and actually zoom into your local area. So I'm going to dive into, this is the Congsbury O, which is my local river. And I saw there's a few people from Weston and Clevedon and local area on the call, so hello to all of you. So you can see once I zoom in, we can actually start to see quite a few different symbols on the map, not just the brown circles. So this is where you really need to look over in the panel on the left-hand side to start understanding what the legend tells us. And those brown circles are now symbolized based on the count of spills. And that's it's a set method that the Environment Agency used to standardize the information between all the water companies. But that will tell you how many times each of those storm overflows have spilt untreated sewage during 2021. And like Christine says, you can actually now view prior years as well. But we've got some other data on here as well. And actually, if you click on each of the different types of symbols, we give you a lot more information to help you understand what this shows and how you can use that information to inform you whether it's safe to swim and things like that. So as well as the EDM data, we've also got storm overflows that don't have event duration monitoring. So these are ones where we don't know when and how often they're spilling. We've only got about just over 10% of them left that don't have monitoring, and hopefully within the next year or two, they will all be monitored. There are other overflows that aren't included on the map, maybe emergency overflows, things like pumping stations. So just be aware that this still doesn't tell us everything. We've also included treated sewage discharges on the map. So these are ones that either are water company wastewater treatment works, for example, where the sewage is treated to a standard, or it could be septic tanks or small package treatment works for domestic properties or holiday homes or businesses, that kind of thing. Again, there are a lot of septic tanks in this country which aren't included in the consented discharge register, which is what we've pulled this information from. But it's just giving you an indication of where those treated sewage discharges are. And it's worth remembering that there's only a requirement to sterilize that treated sewage and remove the harmful bacteria if there's a designated bathing water downstream of it. So a lot of the inland wastewater treatment works won't actually do that sort of third level of treatment because they're not required to. So let's have a look at a bit more detail. So I'm going to zoom in. My local MP, John Penrose, lives in Winscombe, so I do like to quite often point out some of the information from his doorstep when I'm trying to engage him in the issue. So I can actually click on the map and click on the points in here and actually start to drill down into a bit more detail. Now, there's quite often an overlap between the storm overflows and the treated sewage as well. So I just want to draw your attention on the map. In the pop-ups, you will actually see this scrolling tool at the bottom that you can actually move between different features where they overlap. And if you're using it on a mobile device, you might only see that header there. You actually need to click on it to open up the full pop-up. So in this case, we've got a storm overflow that spilled 50 times for a total of nearly 700 hours last year. That's almost once a week. And I can scroll through and see there is another storm overflow there as well. That's often the case, that we get more than one at the same location, and that's not a mistake. Quite often they have separate consents, and it might be just the way that the sewage network is configured that there are two overflows. And we can also see that there's treated effluent being discharged here as well. So that's one way you can start to sort of drill down and query the map and really start to find out what's going on. It's also worth knowing that you can, to help you with interpreting the map, you've got a measure tool here. So if you're interested in how far upstream or downstream this site is from an area that you swim, you can use that. You can also change the base map as well. You can put on an imagery base map just to help you find your location a bit better. So that's a bit more about the map itself, but I'm going to hand back to Christine now, who's going to introduce you to a couple of the other tabs that we've got on the map, where we've hopefully cut the data up in different ways to help you start interpreting it.
Thanks, Michelle. Back to sharing mine. Okay, so this is the other tab at the top. Sorry, I have to move my stuff around so that I can see it. And if you click here on Investigate, this takes you into one of the new features, which is a dashboard, drawing on the same source data that Michelle's been talking about. The numbers that you're seeing at the top when you first go into this Investigate tab are the storm overflows and untreated sewage discharges for both England and Wales, because we've included the Welsh data in this map as well. I think the numbers that a lot of us in England have become quite familiar with, 2.6 million hours in total for the duration of overspills into our rivers. So that's 364,000 times that was happening around the country in 2021. But of course, you know, the situation is pretty much as bad in Wales, and so those numbers get even higher when we're looking in Wales as well. And because of the kind of queries that we got really frequently from people who were trying to use the map, and especially journalists and local news who really wanted to find out what's specifically going on in their area, we've added these categories onto this Investigate page so that you can search through the data based on water company, local authority district, parliamentary constituencies, CABA, that's the catchment-based approach, catchments, Water Framework Directive, water bodies as well. And you can start looking through these different categories and filter them to start here. If we look for Severn Trent water, then you can start zooming in just on the data that applies to one of these categories, and you'll see the summing up here in this dashboard at the top. So in the Severn Trent area, there were more than 59,000 spills in 2021, and that went on for nearly 500,000 hours, 461,000 hours at this number of overflows. We're also telling you the total number of storm overflows so that we can see how many storm overflows still need to be drawn into this monitoring network where we're getting this continuous discharge information. Okay, so I'll hand back to Michelle just to take you through some of the other information on that page.
Thanks, Christine. Yeah, so we've built in, and it's really good to see in the chat that people are finding this useful, certainly local authority area and constituency. We know that really helps people engage their local representatives in the issues that we've got. And it's worth just flagging as well you'll see we've got some storm overflows appearing kind of in the middle of the sea here. Now, these are obviously errors that were part of the data when we received it, and we've thought long and hard about what to do about these and whether it should be down to us to be correcting this or whether we just flag these errors and pass them back to the EA. And that's what we've decided to do. But we're actually, we've built a feedback form into the main map to allow you, we've had a lot of people contacting us saying, oh, we think there's an error or something's in the wrong place. That's really useful feedback. And we would just encourage you to provide us that information. We are passing that back to the water companies and to the Environment Agency. And we're also, where we've got an error flagged to us, we are putting it into that pop-up information as well, so that you can see, you know, what the quality of the information is that is being provided to you by the water companies and by the Environment Agency. So back to the sort of filters we've got on here. We've also, as well as the sort of water companies and the local authorities, we've got constituencies. So again, this is really useful if you want to start engaging your MP in the battle. So if I again pick John Penrose and his constituency that I'm a member of. So Weston-super-Mare, we can see over here, we've got 10 out of the 12 storm overflows now have monitoring on, which is good. That's definite progress from where we were a few years ago. We've got about 200 spills over the year, and rather alarming statistic for such a small area of 2,600 hours of spills. So it's really useful to be able to filter down at that level and to be able to pull that information out so you can write directly to your representatives. But we can also filter by different ways as well. So, but the key thing is to use these reset buttons, because if you start stacking some of these filters up, then they can interfere with each other. So use the reset button to go back to the national picture, and then we can start to look at things like filtering by the number of spills. So we might be interested perhaps in the ones that are spilling most frequently. So DEFRA and EA use different categories of spills. So perhaps more than 20 a year, more than 40 a year, they'll have different response based on that. And certainly the ones that are spilling more than 60 times a year, the data now also includes a reason that those are spilling most frequently. So it's really useful to be able to filter that out on the map and then start to drill down into that. And I'll talk a little bit in a sec about how you can start to interpret that information. And you can do the same with the total spill duration as well. So if we reset that one and start to look at the ones that are spilling most frequently, you can start to pick that information out of the map as well and start to build up a picture where in the country those problems are the most severe. So the last tab on the map that I'll take you through now is the download tab. So this was something that we introduced towards the end of last year, actually, with the old data. People were asking if they could cookie cut it to their area and actually be able to take the data away in different formats. So again, you know, we try and make things as open and usable as possible, and just responding to your requests. So please do, you know, use the feedback form to let us know any other things that would be useful to you as well. Now it's worth saying that this tab really doesn't work on mobile. So you're gonna, if you want to cookie cut the data and actually download it as a report or a CSV file, you're really going to need to use a computer to do that. We've got instructions on the left-hand side here, and as you can see, it does take a little while to load because it's using GIS functionality on here now. You're actually doing sort of spatial queries. But what you can do on here, if you want to grab the data for a bespoke area that maybe it's not the constituency boundary, you can digitize your own polygon. You can also upload your own shapefile. So those of you who work with spatial data and GIS will be familiar with these. So it's a way of collecting a boundary or a polygon of information. And you could upload your own area in there. But if you just want to take the green boundaries on here are those constituency boundaries again. So again, if I select the constituency that I'm a member of. And you can pick more than one. You don't have to just pick one at a time. And then I can use that to generate a report. And that will go away and query all of the storm overflow information. And you can see it's chewing through and collating the information that I can now drill down and browse it on here, the full information that sits behind there. But I can also do a couple of other things. So I can generate a printout now, so I can configure that and decide what format I want. And then it will go away and generate a printout. And it's actually going to put a map in here in a second, and I can change the map title, the report title in here as well, so I can do a bit of configuring. And as it's just chewing through that, yeah, you can see there's the map and there's all of the overflows that it's pulled out. But it's also now given me all of the information that sits behind that, which is really useful if you want to go on, write to your local representatives or engage your parish council or your local authority. And if we drill down, we can start to see some really useful information. It's got the permit numbers for all of those storm overflows. So that's helpful if I want to go and look in more detail about what the permitted activity is. It tells me the type of overflow, so different structures within the network, and obviously the location information. It's also going to tell me what the receiving water body is. So is it the river or the estuary? It tells me when the monitoring was commissioned. So when did the water company actually install the equipment that starts monitoring? And if you keep drilling down, you've got your spill duration and spill number. But also on this table here, you can start then to see, and it's a bit rough and ready with the formatting. We are going to do some improvements to this to make it more human readable. But it's worth noting that these are those reasons for the high spillers in here that I was talking about earlier. So where you see something referring to hydraulic capacity, that means the sewer network just can't cope with the volume of both sewage and storm water that's entering it. So that information there tells me, you know, if there are housing applications going into the local authority around that area, and we've got hard evidence there that the sewer network is already over capacity, then, you know, that's a really good bit of information that you can use to perhaps object to planning applications, etc. So that's the sort of information you can get if you start to drill down into the downloads. And if you want to take this information away and perhaps put it into your own map, or you know, use it in some of your own software, then again you can download it as a CSV file from here. That's just your filtered bit, or you can go back to the full data sets here, and we've included all of the download links for each of those previous 3 years that we've collated the information for. And that's available on our open data site, as it's compatible with lots of different pieces of software. It's all open data formats. It's not going to load for me very quickly now because we're trying to do too much at once. But yeah, this is an open data site, so you can actually load the data into lots of different software. It's available as a live data feed, as an application program interface. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour for some of the additional functionality we've included this year. I'm just going to dip back into our story map collection. So each of these are story maps now. And I'd really encourage you to have a read through of some of these other tabs, the frequently asked questions. We've collated some of the things, the queries that people have asked us over the years. But the what can you do tab is really important. That's, you know, giving you some inspiration about, okay, I've got this information in my hands now. What can I actually do to make a difference in my local area? So I'm just going to close some of these tabs down, or my screen will never load. Always the joy of live demos. When this does load, hopefully you're going to see a picture which was from a demonstration that the Oxford, the Mid-Thames End Sewage Pollution Group held a protest earlier in the year about sewage pollution on their local river. So we went along and spoke at that demo, and it was amazing. There was hundreds of people there, all telling Thames Water and the Environment Agency clearly that they're not happy with this situation and that they care about their local river. And that group, the starting point for that was when we published the map a year ago. And they were appalled to see this information for the first time, to actually have it in their hands and see what it meant for their local area. You know, until now, this problem's been hidden away. And that's why we're so passionate about open data and about getting things out into the public. So that group really, you know, kicked off by a wonderful person, Claire Robertson, who went to the local council and argued passionately that they should support an application for designated bathing water status. And as you hopefully have seen in the news, they've been successful. The second river site in the UK to be designated, which is fantastic, because that creates a driver to actually start to tackle some of these pollution sources. And on top of that, so we worked and supported the group and worked with our local trust, Thames 21, with the City Council, with Thames Water as well, to fund a citizen science programme. So to really collect some brilliant scientific data that can help us identify what the main sources of bacterial pollution are in that river. And that's going to lead on to additional work to actually start tackling some of the problems. So that's just a really good sort of inspirational case study. And, you know, there were many more springing up around the country. If I hand back to Christine now, who can talk about some of the other actions that we can take. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just going to share back onto that same page as well. Thanks, Michelle. So yeah, this part of that story map collection is really kind of now guiding you towards action, after seeing all the information and interrogating what's useful for you at your local area. At the moment, government have a plan out, which is out for consultation, a pretty short period of time. It's only out for 6 weeks. And the closing date for that is the 12th of May. And it's their plan that they're required to put together under the Environment Act for how they're going to stop sewage pollution and reduce. It's called the Storm Overflow Discharge Reduction Plan. And we're pretty disappointed with the level of ambition set in the targets in that plan. We don't think that it's good enough or fast enough. We think it's too narrow. It's putting very narrow targets only on water companies. But of course, one of the big drivers behind storm overflows and raw sewage getting into our rivers is the whole drainage network of our towns and cities. So it requires on a lot of different stakeholders to change what we're doing. Not only the water companies, although of course the water companies do need to make changes as well and much more investment in that infrastructure. So we're really encouraging you to take part in that consultation. It doesn't take long. And on Friday, we published a blog that gives a bit more detail about why we don't think this plan is good enough. But along with the things that aren't going well and plans that are not strong enough and fast enough, we also want to focus on, well, why do we want to do this? Because we love our rivers and we want to be able to play in our rivers. We want them to be full of wildlife. We want our children to inherit rivers, that they can really fall in love with as well. And we want our rivers to be safe, unpolluted places. So we'd like to know more about where the places are that you really enjoy your rivers. And we hope, similar to the story that Michelle told, that these places can be designated for better protection, and particularly where there's a chance to designate for bathing water status as well. So we'd really like to gather that data and that information with you. We're also really encouraging people to get involved with their local Rivers Trusts, their local member trusts. You heard about Thames 21 getting involved with that Oxford bathing site. There are member trusts all around the country doing great things with their rivers. So please get involved with them and stay in touch with us as well, because we'd like to keep you up to date with what's happening and how you can be really effective, and we need your voice to be added in order to make the changes. So of course, please share this map, let people know about it. Yes, we definitely want your money, and we extra want it this week because if you donate to us this week, the big match will double your money. So it helps us to carry on doing this kind of work. And also we want you to get in touch with your MP. That's why we've put this constituency kind of cookie cutter into that investigate tab so that you can analyze what's happening in your constituency. We're also talking to the other NGOs in the End Sewage Pollution Coalition about how we're going to try and automate this and do this more easily for you. So another reason to keep in touch. But for now, this button helps you to get in touch with your MP and let them know what you think about it. And I'm sure that it's not that you're overly happy with the situation. So, okay, after that introduction, gosh, we've got a lot of questions in the Q&A, which we will come to now. So I'll open up that Q&A. If in looking through this, if there are questions that you think are really relevant, if you just like them, click on them, and then they get pushed to the top of the list. And Michelle and I will do our best to get through as many as we can now. So the one that's currently at the top is from Trish Marsh, um, asking us whether we might do a similar map for intensive livestock units. Yeah, I mean, this is the biggest source of pollution into our rivers is actually from agriculture broadly, and livestock are a really important part of that. Of course, that data is available in a very different kind of way. So, Michelle, what's your comment on mapping out livestock impacts?
Yeah, I mean, this one's really tricky. I mean, on the one hand, yeah, a big sort of livestock unit, we could, I mean, there aren't national databases of these, or at least, nothing that we have free access to at the moment. But you can collate that locally, and I know they've been doing that in the Y. But it's all the other sort of livestock impacts that are really tricky
Mm,
to have available on map, because obviously livestock moves around in the landscape. Cows and sheep are moved from field to field. Having that sort of real-time information isn't something that's really practical in short term. What we do have access to, and it's diving into a bit more detail than we would want to put on a sort of publicly accessible map, I think, is the sort of information that our member trusts are using to target their farm advisors and their agricultural advice, and to target their more detailed monitoring. So there are models that ADAS and other consultancies have developed to look at modelling the impact of agriculture across whole catchments. There's models like FarmScoper and some really technical ones that look at nationally amalgamating the impacts of pollution from agriculture. But we've always got that problem, which is these things are movable. And I've heard people saying that sheep feces is actually far more of an impact in terms of the sort of human health impact than any other type of feces. If you've got a bunch of sheep swimming just upstream of where you're swimming, then that's going to have much more of an impact on
mm,
your health risk than perhaps a big livestock unit that's many kilometers away. But how do you put that information on a map? I think until we've got the solution to me for that kind of thing is that we need to focus on monitoring and getting low cost sensors out there
mm.
with proxy information that can tell us about there's something's changed in the river today, elevated levels. It may not give you your bacterial counts because that's technically challenging to do in real time, but we're looking actively now at other things that we can use to give us that real time information. But I'd be more than happy to chat to people who've got ideas about this. We are going to look to improve the map this year. So if there are things that you're aware of, data sets that you're aware of, particularly nationally, that we could incorporate perhaps in a separate version,
Yeah.
then that would be great.
Yeah, and also just to emphasize that there's a lot of spatial data available in the State of Our Rivers report as well. So on that key issues tab where I showed you how to get into the sewage in our rivers as a key issue, there's a lot in there. So yeah, please do go in and have a look. I'll come to the next question now. This is from Robin Horton, and it says, it's a question we often deliberate amongst ourselves as well about comparisons. How does this data compare to other similar developed countries, for instance, in Europe? And is it possible to compare and have a league table of where we are in the wider world?
So, I mean, that's a great question because it's always useful to know, how big a problem it is compared to elsewhere. It's not an easy one with this type of data because that requirement for water companies to publish that EDM information came from, it was Richard Benyon actually, so it was our own government, it wasn't an EU directive. So we're
Mm,
not going to have directly comparable information elsewhere. I mean, at the moment, we're trying to incorporate information from Northern Ireland and the Republic and from Scotland, and we don't have even comparison between all of the countries in the UK or Ireland because not everyone is required to report that information the same way. What we do have at an EU level is the bathing water information. So the designated bathing waters are designated under what was primary EU legislation. So you can look on the European Environment Agency website and see where we are compared to our ex-EU member state
mm.
partners, and that legislation still carries through. So we're still reporting that at the moment. But yeah, when it comes to combined sewer overflows, unfortunately, there isn't a requirement on all countries to do that. But that's where local pressure and pushing for that open data really helps.
Thanks, Michelle. Um, so I'm looking at the questions that have got the most votes here. I'm hoping that that reflects the most interest, just for the last couple of minutes. So a question here about how the data is gathered for the actual monitors. Are these maintained? In other words, are you confident that all spills are captured throughout a year?
Yeah, so that's a
Variable.
really good question. I mean, there is a statistic within the database for each of the monitors as to how much of the year they were operational. So where the water company knows that there was a problem with the equipment and that was captured, then that is included in the database. But that doesn't, of course, tell you whether it was capturing information but just
Mm,
wasn't accurate. And that's quite a tricky one. I mean, we're still trying to get to grips with that in terms of understanding the different types of equipment that are installed and some of the errors that might be introduced in that. I think that's a work in progress, quite honestly. Getting the data collated nationally was our first goal, and now trying to understand the quality of it and what some of the errors are that can creep in. The water companies some of them have been quite good at actually proactively providing that information to us. So where they report errors and say, this isn't, quite often it's where it's over
mm,
reporting. It'll be in their interest, obviously, to track those errors. So we are dependent on that to a degree. But again, that's where we can build in the citizen science element. So what we want to do in the long term is link this up to some of our citizen science schemes like Outfall Safari, where people go out and actually spot visible signs of sewage pollution. If we can start to incorporate that on the map as well, it gives you another weight of evidence to show alongside. You never try and rely on just one type of information. If you were going to try and put pressure on locally, you would want to sit down with anyone who has that sort of local knowledge as well.
mm. Um, Thanks, Michelle. Oh, I see the things are jumping around here, but let me come to a question from Julian Selman, which is really interesting about the response to the challenge. And he says, I'm concerned about what solutions will be implemented to address sewage discharges. In my area, Wessex Water is proposing to install a large overflow tank to reduce the number of overflows. Good that they're doing something, but this could result in substantial disturbance. So just generally on that issue, the whole thing about is the cure for this going to be worse? And is it going to cost too much? Is it going to in itself have a significant environmental impact and potentially a bigger carbon cost, particularly where we're seeing engineered and kind of concrete based solutions. And I think this is where, certainly at the Rivers Trust, we've been really advocating for nature based solutions to be implemented as far as possible, and for more upstream solutions as well, particularly around sustainable urban drainage. And I think this is something that we wanted to see coming out much more explicitly and specifically in the government's plan. They kind of give some vague guidance towards it, but there are no specific targets around nature-based solutions, or milestones, or much clearer directives as to who needs to do what in making sure that we don't end up with a situation where the solutions are, having even greater impact. So yeah, that's a great question, Julian, and I think that's why we really want everyone to participate in this and let it be known that, in solving this problem, we could be achieving a whole lot more rather than just putting in concrete tanks. Michelle, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the key things that's needed to really scale up those nature-based solutions is more evidence of how effective they can be.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're working on at the moment is something called the Catchment Monitoring Cooperative, which is going to build a national set of citizen science methods that could be acceptable to the sort of funders that we need to get involved, the green finance partners and the water companies and the environment agency, so that we can provide that level of evidence that's needed to show the impact of these nature-based solutions. Everything's going to have to be done in a different way. The system is geared up to work with end of pipe concrete solutions with high levels of certainty and engineering, and nature-based solutions just don't work that way. You've got to be prepared to take decisions with more risk and more uncertainty, but we also know we need to fill those evidence gaps. So that's one of the things that we're very focused on tackling now, so that we can really change the pace and scale at which we can deliver those types of solutions.
Yeah, because some of the solutions could actually really contribute towards nature's recovery, greening urban areas. There's a whole lot of work that could be done around slowing the flow and keeping stormwater out of sewers, renaturalizing the water cycle in towns that could have multiple benefits. And that's what we'd really like to see implemented. And that's what we want to see in this plan as well. This should be a golden opportunity for government to make explicit its intentions around that, but we haven't seen it yet. So we've got a question here from Peter Coleman Smith about any more examples of what folks have done with the data which have resulted in positive change, and forums, Facebook pages, etc., just so that we can share ideas and experiences. I mean, the Oxford example is a lovely one. What other ones are there that you'd like to share, Michelle?
So, I mean,
Many.
they're springing up all over the country,
Yeah,
really. I mean, what I think we've got to be careful is not to expect that just go out and do a few water quality samples and
yeah.
next week we're going to solve the problem, because we're dealing with water company investment cycles that work at the moment over, crazy timeframes. It takes sort of 5 years to plan to deliver over 5 years. So we've got to manage expectations in the short term, but that doesn't mean we can't push for those timeframes to be changed. And we're all water company customers at the end of the day. You have a voice as a water company customer. Write to your water company and tell them that you want action on this. They are driven by, legislation and sort of timeframes and things that take those long time. But the water companies can move further and faster if there's local demand for that. So, use your voices and make your feelings known, because you've heard just in the last week, I think it was Liv Garfield saying, well, we didn't know our customers were concerned about this. Well, don't give anyone the excuse to say that they didn't know that you cared about that, is what I would say.
Mhm. Thanks, Michelle. And just a very final question, because we're up against the clock now. One from Philip Jackman. that says, would it be feasible to combine weather data with spill data to understand the correlation between rainfall and discharges? That's a great question, and we've seen really good examples of that from Peter Hammond, and actually a recommendation in the Environmental Audit Committee report on the poor quality of water in our rivers, that recommends to government that this is the kind of monitoring that the EA should be doing, and using machine learning and artificial intelligence to implement this as well. So yes, it should be feasible, definitely. Any extra comment on that, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, we've found that's a really useful approach when you're looking at,
Mm,
is this storm overflow really due to excess rainfall, or is it actually, happening when it shouldn't? So definitely you can learn a lot more, but you need a more detailed tier of information that isn't available as one big national data feed at the moment. You'd have to put in an FOI request to your water company and request the detailed stop and start times for the spills, and then collate the rainfall information and do it all yourself. So Peter Hammond, he's going to be running a webinar on how he's done this, which I think would be absolutely brilliant for people who want to
mm,
dive into that detail. But we're also pushing for this data to be available as live feeds. So as the water companies bring on their live notifications,
mm.
having something that can pull that rainfall data together, so it again increases the transparency on what's happening, I think will be a really fantastic next step. And just before we finish, I just want to say there's loads of really good questions in here. We will try and collate them and write some answers and share them on our website, along with some of the other resources we put together. For example, we set up a Slack workspace a while ago for groups that are interested in this to network. So I think if we just sort of refresh those links and remind people of where else they can get more information, and maybe we need to run another event with some Q&A, because yeah, there's some great questions, and sorry we've run out of time.
Yeah, well, we're definitely responsive to your needs and wants. So do let us know if a similar event, maybe tackling it from a different perspective, would be helpful in the future. Really happy to do that. I'm hoping that Becca, who's up here with us, can capture all of these questions that are in the Q&A. And as we said, a recording of the webinar will be going up on our YouTube channel probably tomorrow morning. So if there's anything that you missed and you want to refer back to it, then please check it out there. But for now, we wish you a great week ahead as we head towards the end of the month, and safe enjoyment of your rivers. And let's keep up the good fight to get them much cleaner than they are at the moment. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.